You know, most of us are used to data sitting in neat rows and columns. But what happens when it just doesn't fit that mold? I mean, what if you need to analyze a song or a genetic sequence or some complex document? That's exactly where specialized data mining comes in.
So, we've gotten really good at mining those classic relational databases, that whole structured world of tables. But the real challenge, and what we're diving into today, is how you apply those same ideas to complex data like music or DNA. Believe me, it's a whole different ballgame.
And the absolute key to tackling that challenge is to completely rethink how we even represent the data in the first place. To really see how this works, let's start with music as our first example.
Right, it seems incredibly abstract, doesn't it? A song is a piece of art, not a spreadsheet. So where in the world do you even begin? Well, the trick is to translate that melody into a language that an algorithm can actually understand.
Okay, so first things first, the music has to be translated into a language a machine can read. And there are basically two main ways to do this. You've got the symbolic format, which is kind of like the sheet music. It's the instructions on what to play. Then you have the acoustic format, which is the actual recording, the WAV or MP3 file. For really deep analysis, the magic often happens during transcription, where we convert that rich sound back into a structured, symbolic form.
Once the music is in a form we can actually mine, we can do some really fascinating things. Think of clustering as an algorithm that automatically creates playlists by musical style, but without ever being told what rock or classical music even is. Classification is more direct. You're teaching a system to label a new song as jazz or pop. And pattern discovery? That's how we computationally find that catchy chorus that gets stuck in your head. You know, the repeating musical signature of a song.
This whole idea of data representation is just as crucial in fields where the stakes are way, way higher, like genomics. So how does data mining help us make sense of our own biology?
Well, the core idea of finding the right way to represent the data is exactly the same, but the sheer scale of genomic data, that is on another level entirely.
Gene expression data often gets organized into a massive grid or matrix, just like this one. You've got the rows, which represent thousands and thousands of individual genes, and the columns, those represent different conditions, maybe different patients or tissues or points in time. The numbers inside the cells just show how active each gene is under each of those conditions.
So, by clustering all this data, scientists can actually find groups of genes that seem to switch on and off together. Does that suggest that they might be working as a team and maybe even pointing to their role in a disease? Precisely. It's all about finding those faint, coordinated signals in an overwhelming amount of noise.
Okay, so we've seen how this works for data that's kind of linear, like music, and for grid data in genetics. But data can also be hierarchical. You know, think about those semi-structured XML documents that pretty much power the modern web.
Right. With hierarchical data, like an XML file, the focus totally shifts. Instead of just comparing values in cells, we have to compare the shape of the data itself. And that means we need a way to quantify how similar their structures are.
And we do that with something called a structural distance metric. It's basically a score that tells us how different two documents are just in terms of their tree-like structure. It measures how much you'd have to change one document's hierarchy to make it look exactly like the other one.
And there are two main ways to calculate that score. First, you have tree edit distance. This is like figuring out the minimum number of moves, inserting, deleting, or changing a part of the tree to solve a puzzle. It's all about the cost of transformation. On the other hand, you have graph matching, which is more like trying to find the biggest identical section in two different blueprints. It's all about that shared structure.
So these metrics and algorithms are obviously super powerful, but they generate some really complex results. How can a human analyst actually explore these patterns without just getting totally lost in the numbers?
Yeah, you can't just stare at a spreadsheet with thousands of rows and expect to find anything. To truly understand this kind of data, you need powerful visualization tools, tools that tap into the most sophisticated pattern recognition machine we know of, the human brain.
So you're saying a tool like VRMiner would let a scientist literally fly through their data and see clusters of genes as if they were constellations? And then just select one to see all its details? Exactly. It's a method we call detail on demand, and it turns data analysis from this static, boring task into an immersive, interactive exploration.
So after this whole journey through music and genes and these complex documents, what's the one single thread that connects all of these specialized data mining fields together?
Here's the ultimate takeaway.
Effective data mining isn't about having the fanciest algorithm. It's about truly understanding the unique structure of your data first. It doesn't matter if it's a melody, a protein interaction, or a web document. The method has to fit the fundamental nature of the information.
And that really brings us to a final thought. We've learned to mine tables, text, sound, biological sequences, and these complex hierarchies. As technology keeps pushing forward, what do you think is the next frontier for data mining?
If you found this explainer useful, please do share it. And of course, subscribe for more deep dives into complex topics. Thanks so much for joining me.